This slideshow is about Tammany Hall, a basically illegal organization that was run by the Democratic Party in New York City. Nothing happened in New York City without the okay of Tammany Hall. The Tammany political machine made a lot of money the way things were in New York City, and they didn't want any trouble from labor strikes. Tammany politicians knew that taking care of the poor immigrants would get them votes, but taking care of the rich business owners would get them money. Tammany leaders had to balance the votes from the poor and the money from the rich. Conditions for people in New York City in 1911, which you can see in this photograph of a New York City tenement apartment by Lewis Hines, were very poor. There was no government assistance in any way. No money if you became unemployed, no help if you ever got hurt on the job, and no money for retirement. These people were too poor and could not afford doctors and could certainly not pay any hospital bills. Their apartments were very small, cramped, and very smelly. The nativist attitudes of anti-immigration and anti-poor were held by most other New Yorkers. In general, a poor, lost, and alone feeling was something that all immigrants had. On your note sheet, explain how these conditions would cause people to feel lost, poor, and alone. This is a Lewis Hines photo of a 5-cent bed. People would pay 5 cents for a few square feet of space to sleep in. They slept on cots, under cots, on boards over the sink, and on the floor. The more people you would cram in, the more money the owner of the apartment made. See if you can find all 7 people in this photo. Tammany Hall. The Democratic Party in New York City ran a political machine that controlled everything in the city for over 50 years. They controlled all the elections, who got into the fire department and the police department, and all of the city services. The goal of all this was to get sugar, which was bribe money. This sugar was the most important thing in Tammany Hall. Sugar made Tammany Hall's world go around. Errand boys. Every block in New York City had to have a few errand boys. These were the lowest level Democratic Party workers who really knew their neighborhood and made sure that every voter stayed happy and loyal to the Democratic Party. They were the eyes, ears, and the mouth of the Democratic Party for all these poor people. They were paid to do small jobs for the Democratic Party, like deliver food to a family who had none, bring a wedding present to a new couple, and find out what the people were thinking or wanting. Look at the picture in the slide. There are thousands of people in that picture. An errand boy would have to know about every single one of them from his neighborhood. The block captain was one step up from an errand boy. He was the man in charge of an entire block or a neighborhood with several hundred families and or thousands of people. He had a dozen or so errand boys working for him. The block captain had worked his way up from being an errand boy by proving his loyalty to the Democratic Party and by making sure that everyone in his neighborhood voted for the Democratic candidate in every election. A perfect block captain would not have had anyone vote Republican in their block or their neighborhood in any election. The ward leader was in charge of as many as 30 or 40 blocks and 30 or 40 block captains, and was a very powerful man. Like the cartoon shows, a ward leader had to make sure that the Democratic Party candidate always won. He also handed out jobs in the police and fire department. Being a competent professional firefighter or policeman had absolutely nothing to do with a person's ability to get the job. You just had to be friends with the ward leader, and obviously, sugar got you the job. The ward leader also controlled who got the sugar or bribe money in his ward. All of this is completely illegal today. District leaders. There were only a few district leaders in Tammany Hall, but they were even more powerful than the ward leaders. They controlled who could operate legal and illegal businesses, who went to jail if they were caught by the police, and who could run for political office. They became very rich on the sugar coming in from all the different wards they controlled. And again, this is completely illegal today. It was illegal then too, but since the police and the politicians all owed their jobs to Tammany Hall, they would not bite the hand that fed them the sugar. The most famous boss of Tammany Hall was known as Boss Tweed. Notice in the picture his bald head, his full beard, and his big belly. The boss of Tammany Hall was the single most powerful man in New York City. He was the leader of the Democratic Party, and everything he wanted happened. He also benefited the most from the sugar. He picked the city's mayor, the fire chief, the police chief, district attorneys, the state representatives from New York City, and the federal representatives from New York City. Thomas Nast was a popular cartoonist in New York City. He didn't like Tammany Hall or Boss Tweed. In this cartoon, what does Nast accuse Boss Tweed of doing? Notice that everyone is pointing to the person to their right. These people, other than Boss Tweed, who's the bald guy with the big belly and the beard on the left, all represented ward leaders and district leaders at the time. On your note sheet, answer the question, what does Nast accuse Boss Tweed of doing? So, how did people get a job in Tammany Hall? Well, most men started out as errand boys. If they did a good job and made powerful friends with the ward leader, they might become a block captain. The way you moved up was to keep your people loyal to the Democratic Party and create sugar or bribe money to give to the people below you to keep them loyal to the Democrats, and to give money to the people above you, which kept them happy. The more bribe money or sugar you created, the farther up the ladder of Tammany Hall power you could go. So I know what you're thinking. This is all extremely illegal. How come the cops didn't come and break this all up? Well, back in 1911, there were no tests or applications to become a police officer. To get a police job, you just had to bribe your ward leader. To become a regular street cop, it cost around $300. To become a police captain in a nice section of the city cost $15,000. The police made money by graft, which is taking money from illegal businesses to allow them to operate. For example, the owner of an illegal drug den would pay the police to let him run his business without the police arresting him. Many cops would borrow money to pay the bribe, sugar, to get the job, and then repay the loan with the graft that they would get from being on the job. On your note sheet, answer the following question. How come the cops didn't break up these illegal political machines? Elections. The Tammany Hall political machine only had power if the Democratic Party won its elections. so it was very important to make sure that everyone voted for the Democratic Party. In one election, where the vote from one block was 388 votes Democratic versus 4 votes Republican, the ward boss said, quote, "That is one more Republican vote than I expected, but I'll find that fella," unquote. By 3 p.m. on Election Day, the ward leaders knew the names of everyone who had not yet voted and sent an errand boy to knock on their door to remind them. This would be a bit intimidating to someone if some guy showed up at your door knowing that you hadn't voted yet. Most of the vote counters and the election officials owed their jobs to Tammany Hall Democrats, so they weren't likely to be fair in counting up the ballots. This is another Thomas Nast cartoon. Mr. Nast worked for a Republican Party-controlled newspaper in New York City, so the Democratic Tammany Hall boss was a favorite target for him. In this cartoon, what is Nast accusing Boss Tweed and Tammany Hall political machine of doing? The glass jug on the table is an old-fashioned container where people would put their paper ballots in. Pay attention to the words on the table. In counting, there is strength. What would that mean? It is a hint to what Nast is accusing Boss Tweed of doing. Now, how did Nast get that idea across to you, the viewer? Think about how he drew Boss Tweed, and what captions did Nast add, and what else did he put in to make you think that? How did Tammany Hall stay so popular? Well, they were loyal to the people that voted for them. If a good Democratic voting family lost everything in a fire, the local errand boy would find out and tell the block captain. The block captain would show up in a few minutes with money for a new apartment, clothes, and food. If someone had died, they would pay for their funeral. When a couple got married, Tammany Hall politicians were the first ones at the door with a wedding gift. In the wintertime, they would get coal for stoves during blizzards. They would give presents to the poor at Christmas and take hundreds of voters on picnics outside the city. All you had to do in return was to vote Democrat in the next election. They were very popular with the poor immigrants living in the city, like those young workers living in the working at the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. Now on your note sheet, answer the following question. Why were poor immigrants so loyal to Tammany Hall? Think about what Tammany Hall would do for them. Think about who would make sure that this family had a place to live, and who would make sure that this woman and child had food, and what would they have to do in return? Remember, this is a time when the government did not give money to anyone for any reason at all.